Okay, good morning. I'm going to talk today about wireframes to widgets. I'm going to talk about everything from starting architecture and designing and talking through wireframes and going through to actually developing and architecting the widgets and things, okay? So, firstly about me. I'm a Dojo and JavaScript consultant. I spend my time working for clients, working on their user interface strategy, and yeah, I will do JavaScript and Dojo. I did 5 years of IBM as a consultant. For the last 2 years, I've been a freelance kind of contractor, mercenary, if you will. I've worked on a senior dev or a lead on 4 or 5 large Dojo projects. So what I'm talking about is what I do for a living. It's what I do. So I'm going through kind of the strategies I use. My clients have included, as you can see here, large companies. I'm not going to name drop them, but lots of companies. And last night, I got lost. So, just something off the bat. Right, so, I'm going to talk about how the process starts, what the wireframe is, the information it conveys and where it came from, so the processes that came into this, managing scope, avoiding scope increases, lack of feasibility study, these kind of things, identifying widgets in wireframes, widgets, I'll come on to that later, widget interactions and connections, architecture, and examples. So, how the story starts. I'm not going to go too technical. I'm going to try and keep it quite high level, just to let you know. So how the story starts. In an enterprise environment, anything that happens normally comes from the business owners, the people with the money, the people that want to change things and create a new product. So, in this story, the business owners want a new product. They have some money. So, they get some business analysts and they gather requirements from the business owners and the subject matter experts, and they gather these requirements. They turn them into stories and things. So then they work with the user experience designers to create the wireframes. In a lot of these enterprise environments and these scenarios, wireframes are the first stage. So the wireframes then get given to the developers to start work, basically. So, I'm going to start basic. What is a wireframe? So, a wireframe is a skeletal model in which only lines and vertices are represented. A wireframe is black and white. It is a design, it is an interaction diagram, it is very basic, it is not exciting, yes? So, it's a visual aid for developers. So I wish I had a clicker, it would have been easier. A visual aid for developers, it's a talking point. It enables developers to talk to one another and show each other their designs and to discuss what they are doing. It shows the interactions. It shows the interactions between different components and different areas, and shows logical groupings, so you can kind of separate things out on a page. And I think finally, it's a starting point for UI conversations. It enables developers to talk to one another about what they're developing, talk to the designers, and to talk to anybody involved in the process. And you can print out a wireframe, walk up to an analyst and say, what is happening here? What is this about? Okay? So, this is a good wireframe, in my opinion. I developed it yesterday. I think it is infringing on YouTube's copyright, but this is what we have. So, it's very clear. It's very concise. We have like a nav menu along the top, which you can't really see. But it's concise, it's clear, it's basic, it's black and white. Okay? And these are the things I like about a wireframe. So what the wireframe is not. It is not a mock-up. Okay? So if you understand the term a mock-up is a Photoshop created version of like a website, how it will look. And in kind of an enterprise environment, in an end-to-end process, this is what you have. So it's not a mock-up. It's important to note this. So it is not pixel perfect. All too much, I have worked with developers, or I've been a developer, I've been this person myself, who has been measuring pixels on wireframes and kind of creating their UI to be exactly the same size. It's not pixel perfect, right? It's not color specific. So it's black and white. It is a suggestion of how the user interface should look. It's not the final product. Also very important to note. It is just an interpretation of the requirements and the specifications at the time it's created. Finally, it's not final. And I've hit the point home twice there, but it is not final. Wireframes change, requirements change, especially under an agile methodology. Things change, okay? So, bad wireframe. You'll notice the beautiful gradients, the green, the corners up here at the top. So I'm pointing at my screen, but you can't see that. Oops. We have a big arrow by the heading. Lots of things open to interpretation here that a developer might take, and they might try and match it. I mean, I'm not saying this is a good design, this is awful. But you have the rounded corners, you have the green, you have the gradients, you have red areas in the cloud tags, or the tag cloud. So developers might run with this, they might develop the wrong thing, and it might give off totally the wrong impression. So, to help deal with things like this, and the kind of next stage in the process is managing scope. So, a common scenario under Agile, again, Agile, the product owners call a meeting with the user interface designers and they're discussing the current wireframes. So something's changed, something's happened, they're changing it around. So the product owners want to add a new feature. So they're discussing with the user interface people, they're discussing with the business analysts. The UX designers add the new features to the wireframe, and then an email drops to your inbox, okay? So we have this. Does anyone spot the difference? We have these dots down here. So to a user interface designer that's working on this, they might think this is a really small change. It's just 3 dots. But to the developer implementing this, you think, crap. The dots signify so much. It signifies real-time updates. The idea of the dots is that when someone is typing, it says this person is typing. If anyone has an iOS device, you're familiar with this kind of idea. So it signifies the need for sockets. It signifies a whole architecture change, potentially. And the user interface designers don't see this, because a lot of the time they're not tech, they're not full stack, they are just, hey, 3 dots, I'll put 3 dots on the screen. So to deal with this, so the problem here, decisions have been made without understanding of impact. So they've gone, hey, yeah, we'll put that here, it's good, we'll do it. No feasibility has been considered. Nothing. No architectural considerations, because they don't have the understanding of it. I mean, I'm not saying they're stupid, but it's not their job. They're not meant to do this. They're meant to keep the business owners happy. So the solution, and this is what I've tried to implement in my roles, and this is what I do for lots of clients. Where possible, the UI tech lead should attend or arrange meetings. So every few weeks, you meet up the UX designers, maybe every week. You discuss the current wireframes, any changes to the wireframes, and you go through them. UX should be aware of the developer's palette. So if you're using a toolkit, say Dojo or YUI or jQuery UI, if you have to, you can discuss. You know what your palette is. You know you have drop downs. You know you have menus. You know you have these things. So you can discuss these with them. The UI representative should understand the full stack architecture, and I think this is important. If you're attending these meetings as a tech lead, you should be able to understand everything that's going on. You should know what your tech stack is. You should know what your server side is. You should know what database you're running. You should understand these things, because it will allow you to create, to make informed decisions. Okay? So, what should the UI tech lead do in these meetings? They should plan ahead, and they should organize the meetings. Don't wait for the UX developers to come to you. You organize the meetings, you attend the meetings. You should plan an agenda. It's very easy to go off track. Manage attendees. You don't want everyone there. You don't want all the developers. If it's a meeting with the user interface designers, you certainly don't want the designers there, because you don't want to be talking about colors. You just want to be talking about the wireframes and the interactions. And this is, meetings run wild. So advise against costly design decisions. If you understand the implications of, say, the 3 dots, then you can advise against this. You can tell them this is a really bad idea. Don't do this. You can help the attendees to understand what the problems are. It's very easy to sit there and say, no, I won't do this, I won't. But if people want it, if they are paying for the product, and yet they have a delivery timeline, you have to make them understand. And if you can, deliver man-day estimates. Sorry, I have no preview, so I'm just running wild here. So man-day estimates. If you can give a product owner, someone that's paying the bills, a man-day estimate for any change that they ask you to do, they will walk away from it, as a general rule. And us developers, we don't like change, do we? We like to just continue on and sunny day scenario. So, I'm going to move on now to widgets, because widget-based user interfaces are what I do. So, what is a widget? I was hoping I could find a definition of the widget in a beer can. Yeah, I couldn't find one. So, a widget is a small gadget or mechanical device. Okay, that might be that. It's an application or component or an interface that enables a user to perform a function. It is a small encapsulated piece of code. In the case of Dojo widgets and digits, which is my speciality, it is a combination of JavaScript code, a HTML template, and CSS or less if you're using a precompiler. So it is self-contained functionality. It should not interfere with anything else. It should be sitting there on its own. It performs a set task to meet a requirement. Okay, so very focused. It's portable and reusable. So you can pick it up, you can reuse it, you can place it on multiple pages. And it has an interface, so functions and events. It can fire events, it can emit events, has an API, if you will. You can say set this, get this, and you can do things with it. And it consists, as I said before, template, JavaScript, and styling. So identifying widgets. In my opinion, print out the wireframes. Some people like looking at pictures on screens. Other people prefer to have a printout. I'm a printout person. You can draw on them, you can touch them, you can walk around with them, you can show them to somebody. Okay? So draw boundaries. So identify your logical groupings. Okay? Identify reused assets. If you find there's a particular specific, unique drop-down box where every third letter is green and you have a search functionality, this is a very unique asset that you're going to reuse, potentially. Identify logical groupings, I mentioned that. So going back to the same wireframe again, you identify your widgets, and I don't know how many I have because I don't have my preview. So here's a widget, it's a rich text editor, a WYSIWYG editor. Here's a widget, it's your navigation bar at the top. So I'm going to go through and identify all of these. Okay? So you'll notice I've even identified the little person there, the avatar, as a widget, because it's a piece of functionality that you could drop on a page that's repeated, and you say, here's the user ID that you are displaying, and it can go and get its data from the data model, the user model, it can grab things, and it's reusable. It may look very small and insignificant, but it is a reusable asset that can, sort itself out and get data. So, identify your widgets. Now, widgets are a term that I came across when I worked at IBM, on an early IBM project, using a large framework IBM developed called IBM Cuba. So, my former mentor and myself used what we called widgets, and he used them at the Marriott Vacation Club, and I used them at the BBC, developing enterprise metadata management. Very large project. You may have heard about the DMI project in the news. This was part of that, and it's a very large asset management, which was actually a success and was delivered. The rest of it failed, we delivered. And the reason for that is because we wrote ours in Dojo, and the rest of it was written in Flex. So it's a business digit. Widget, business digit, play on words, it's good. It contains the business logic and connects smaller digits together. I did think for a while that me and Matt discovered this idea one night in the pub, but apparently he'd been using it for years. I found information on his blog, and I was going to give you a story about how I spent time in the pub, and we went, yeah, business digit, we'll do this. But apparently that didn't happen. Yeah. So it forms a specific task. It meets a business need, and I think this is important again. It is something to perform a business need. We have a user need, like a widget. I need to enter some information. I need to validate some data. But a widget, you could think of it as a controller, is a business need. So I want to post a comment. I want to review and analyze my data. Okay, so it's a business need. And again, self-contained functionality. And yeah, another point, sorry, just seeing these. It's potentially an MVC or an MVP of its own. So it has its own interactions, its own observers, it has its own functionality. So, identifying widgets. I'm going to use green for business widgets. So I'd call this a widget. This is the add a comment area. Assuming that the tag cloud is the tags from the comments, then you can make an assumption that this is a logical grouping of assets. The thing on the left is also a widget. It is the text combined with the video. It's a self-contained object. Might have reusability. It's the kind of thing you'd find out. It might have placement on other websites. So it's good to design it in this way. And I think finally, the whole thing is probably a widget. If you're talking about a single page application, and this is one of those pages, or one of those areas within the application, then you will need to bootstrap and load this entire component. So that can be a widget, that can be a large component. So, static content. I think this is a bit of a wayward slide here, but I think it's important. The text you saw there describing the video is probably static content. It's not going to change, it won't change, so there's no need to request all of the data for it, because in a client-side UI, you would generate the user interface, and then all of the widgets would fire off requests and say, give me your data, and I'll display it. There's no need to do that for this kind of data, so it's good to work out what you can generate in the back end. Utilize JS server-side technology if you can to share resources. If you have a model or you have data that's shared front and back end, share it if you can. Pre-populate your models. Server-side render templates, if you're into that. But a lot of this depends on your app structure. It depends if you're single page or multi-page. If you're bootstrapping one page at a time and putting all of your content onto it and having a page level controller, then it's not as important. But if you are rendering lots of stuff in the fly and utilizing lots of memory, you're better off piping things down as much as you can. So, identify your data flows. Again, we're back to the widget diagram here. Draw lines off of the wireframes to external stores. I've missed the point here. Draw your external stores. Draw them on and say, this is my user model. This is my comments model. These are the things I'm going to share data with. Identify your data payloads. You want to minimize your restings. I'm not going to talk about batching up requests, but you want to minimize your requests to make them efficient and direct and appropriate. Okay? If you're developing an API, you want them to be fitting. Okay? So, determine your widget relationships, so how the widgets will share their data. So, we're going back to this area here. I've identified this as one widget. Okay? We've said it's a commenter. So we'll separate the widgets out. But I think these are three widgets, three main widgets. We'll identify some stores. I don't know how big the text is. Yeah, we have a user model and a comments model. Doesn't matter what functionality they're written in, doesn't matter, but they're two models, two databases, two views, two memory stores, two objects, two arrays, whatever they are. And there's data flowing between them. Okay? So I'm going to break down some widget functions here. Draw out your scenarios. So again, the widgets, we've talked about connecting widgets, but if you've got larger widgets, they need to talk to each other, and if they're on different pages, they need to communicate information between one another. So it's good to talk about your scenarios for your key functions. Identify your user interactions. How is the user going to use my widget, my UI? How are they going to interact? What technology? Are they on a touch screen? Have they got a keyboard? Identify all of these things. Determine your model functions. Choose your patterns, observer patterns, that's the only one I can remember, factory pattern, whatever you're using, identify them, work out how you are going to develop this. So, for saving a comment, just for example, a quick walkthrough, it's good to think about these kind of things so that you can put together a spec and you can put together a criteria for how you will develop it, okay? So, someone's put in the comment, great. They've said, I love this, it's great. So I'm identifying boundaries here. I've got my models at the top, I've got my boundary. So it fires a save event. Get value is called on the widget. A JSON model has been created. Okay? And we are getting the user ID from the user model. So I'm just walking through this. So now we've got a populated JSON payload. We've got the user ID in there from the model. We've got the comment from the text box. So we send it using a post comment function with arguments to the component model. And the component model says, save success, it was good, it was great. And then we call clear on the text editor, and it's cleared. Finally, the models fire their observers. They say, hey, I've changed. I've got new data. Come look at my data. So, I mean, this is a quick walkthrough of the functionality of, say, this component. And it's good to think about these things and to consider them and to work out how they will interact, how they will act, and what they will do. So widget interfaces, again, we've got the same objects I just discussed. And we're thinking about what they do, what events they fire, what functions they have, what setters and getters they have. So here we have like a save event. The model is going to tell us if it's been successful, if it's been failed. It's going to fire an observable event saying, I've got a new comment, so that if you've got an MVC framework, your other views can understand that a new comment has been saved and that there's new data. It's important to consider your architecture. Sorry. Are you a single or are you a multi-page app? This changes everything. If you're single page, then you've got to worry about managing memory allocations. You've got to worry about how you will route into things. If you're multi-page, you don't care, do you? You just load up a bit of code, bootstrap it, throw it on the page, and when the user goes to the next page, memory's gone. You're happy. It's all good. So, do you have page controllers? Do you have routing? Where are your models created? Again, I talked about pre-populating models. It's important to know where your models are coming from and where their data is coming from. Where are your XHR requests performed? So if you've got an Ajax user interface, are your views populating their own, getting their own data? Are the models getting the data, or are the controllers getting the data? So you need to think about these things, and you need to plan which way you're going to do it. There's so many different patterns for all of this out there. You have to work this out. Where are your views created? I mean, this is just a list of questions to consider. Where are your views created? Event management, DOM events. Are you going to have DOM events? Are you going to have JavaScript events with like an emitter like Dojo on? You can emit events. You've got to think about these things. And are you using, like, say, a pub sub mechanism? A lot of people use a pub sub mechanism for loosely coupling. So one widget will publish an event with some data, another widget will subscribe to that data, and it will update its views from there. So some examples. I'm going to talk about some of the projects I have worked on, some of the projects I'm on at the moment, and we'll go through this. So, at the moment, I'm the tech lead for Thomson Reuters, and we are going through we're writing a huge UI. So it's based on Dojo. We have a widget library and a framework written in Dojo, and I say it's called Indium. It enables us to deploy our apps, and it does inter-widget communication. It does lots of things. We're using Dojo. We're using Node.js. We've got it's a huge backbone of kind of model. I can't go into it too deep because it hasn't been released or anything, and it's an internal product. But I'm going to discuss some of it. It uses deep routing. One of the things our Indium router has is it can deep link into applications. So we have a large single-page application, and we can deep link maybe 2 or 3 models deep into an application, and we can pre-populate the controllers and the models and the views, and it's very clever. We have our own custom model structures, so we can have observable models and stateful models. We can pre-populate them in a model factory. We can inject them into our views. So we have a lot of kind of dependency injection. So I'm going to talk about the list digit. Anybody here familiar with Digit or Dojo? Yeah, you are. So a widget, as I said, is a self-contained piece of functionality. There's one key component, in my opinion, that's missing from Dojo, and it's a decent list. We have a grid, we have the D grid, you have drop-downs, you have menus, you have calendars. There's no list. So I created for my clients this list. Doesn't look that exciting. It's just black and orange, which is our style guide. But sitting under that, we have an observable store. So there is a data store sitting behind that widget, and when the data updates on the widget, the view will change. The whole thing will change, and you can populate the model, you can populate from anywhere. You can give it a store, you can give it data, it will create its own store. There's lots of ways you can interact with it. It's highly configurable. So this one, as you see, has multi-select set to true, and it has a search box. So very exciting. Each item is a digit. The way I've written it, each row is a digit, so you can customize it. You can say, I want your view to have a description. I want it to have a pop-up. When I hover, I want a tooltip to come up. So it's very configurable. When you start it up, you say, this is your view type, and you are going to display this list type. What's that mean? Yeah, so there's a base class for that list item type that I've created. So when you create your own custom type, you say, base it on this type, and go from there, okay? It's very DOM light. And something I'm very keen on, it's semantically correct. A lot of digits and components you come across have got maybe 8 levels of like divs and spans. If you've ever looked at a Dojo component, you should try. Look at a button. See how many levels deep the actual input button is in a Dojo button. It's about 4 levels, I think. And so this is very light. It's just a list with list items. It's a UL component with lots of LIs. Very basic. What is inside the LIs depends on the type of list item you're showing. Easy to style, fires events, provides getters and setters. So it's pretty standard. So we'll talk about some of the interactions I've set up for this. So there's about 3 entry points to set the data. Entry points are important to consider when you're talking about a digit, because it's how your widget will, sorry, I'm interchanging widget and digit. It's how your digit will get data from the outside world. It's how it will display it. It's how it will start itself up and bootstrap. So I've created 3 for this. You can say, here's your data, here's your store, or here's your REST endpoint. I want you to get your own data. So different ways. So in this case, you set the data on the store. The widget will query the store, loop through the results, and create the objects. With the observable pattern, one thing Dojo have done with their observable stores is when you set the data, no observers are fired, which I think is a good thing, because if you consider maybe you're entering in like a grid list or something, if you were entering like 1,000 lines of data, if the observable fired every entry, you would get a shitload of events firing, and it would go nuts, and your memory usage would fire off, and your laptop would explode, and Chrome would die. It would give you that page that said, oops. So here's another way of getting in. You set an endpoint. So this then makes the widget asynchronous in its bootstrap mechanism. You set an endpoint, you say, here, go to / blah, go get my data. It does an exec-jar request and uses a promise API to say, when or then, go and do this. So again, queries and loops through. But the nice thing about it is, as I said, we have an observable store. So in this case, it all happens automatically. So you add an item to the store, it fires an observer event, the widget listens to that observer event and says, hey, you've entered a new item now, or I'm going to put a new item in. And further than this, the observable store in this case is the base of the entire widget. So even when you click on an item, the base class item says, hey, I've been clicked. I'm going to fire an event to say I've been clicked. And it says, yep, I've been clicked, I've been clicked. The widget listens to that event, and it says, right, you've been clicked. I'm going to get your item out of the store. I'm going to set selected equals true, if that is what the widget does, and I'm going to throw it back into the store. So the exact same mechanism happens. The list says, I've been clicked. It adds the new item or puts the item back into the store with selected equals true. The observable fires, and everybody's happy. It goes off. So it's very useful, the observer pattern, if you have, for example, 2 lists, or a list and a grid, or a list and bullet points, because they all listen to the same events, and when things change, things can adapt. And otherwise, you'd have lots of events firing. You'd have lots of custom connections. You'd have to say, on this click, on this selected equals true, and it makes it much easier. Okay, and again, it's very customizable. So you see in the middle here, you see like a title, a description, and an image. So that's a custom list type. There's extended the list. And on the far side, that side, you have a tree list. So you say tree. I mean, if you understand how digits work and how you would set a widget up, you say, here's your parameters. So set tree mode to true. Set multi-select to false. Set lazy loading of your children to true. So one of the nice things about the tree is, again, very DOM light. If you click on an item and it has not loaded its children, there's no DOM there. You request the data comes back, it loops through the data, well, it puts it into the store, the events fire, it says whose children are you, who's your parent, and it puts the data in there and it builds the DOM nodes. So it keeps it very light, and it doesn't use up too much memory. Okay? So I'm going to go on to another client now, and I'm now going to talk more about the larger scale of things, larger applications. I worked for a company called Genie Connect. I did a contract for them a couple of years ago. Fascinating company. They have a product for conferences. Track management, event management, schedule management, speakers, everything. So it's a conference portal. I've just talked about this. Yeah. User-friendly CMS. The CMS and the front end are both written in Dojo. You're noticing a pattern here, I'm guessing. Yeah? So it deploys native apps for iOS and Android. So you go into the CMS and you say, here's my application, here's my speakers, here's my sponsors. I want to call my speakers teachers. I don't want to call them speakers. You can change all of these things. You add a color scheme, and it kicks out native apps for iOS and Android. I think it used to do BlackBerry. I don't think it does that anymore. I don't know why. I think BlackBerries are great. Desktop web application. This is what I did. So they thought, we have all these applications for phones, but we want a desktop application. So I got there, and their architecture, quite interesting. Google App Engine backend with Bigtable. If you're familiar with this, I think it's Java. I don't know much about it. I'm just saying what they use. Dojo front-end CMS. Data layer via a custom JSON REST store. So they have a custom store. So you say, get this item. The store is preloaded in memory. If the store does not have the item you're looking for, it will go off, request it, get it, and return it to you. Single page with routing. Viewport display using the digit border container. I don't know how everybody feels about flow layouts or viewport displays, but they're different approaches. Global app object. One of the things I'm not a massive fan of on this, rather than having, it was written before asynchronous loading of modules. So there's a global app object, basically. Every request goes through app.getThis, app.model.change, and it's all through there. So when I first got there, this is their wireframe. Not the best wireframe, in my opinion. Too many colors. Too many colors, shadows. There's pictures in there. There's a picture of a person. There's too much. Very hard to interpret. And the finished example looks nothing like it. Absolutely nothing like it. So if you consider the change, yeah, it's pretty dramatic. So when I say wireframes are not final, they're not final. Everything changes. So the finished product is great. Very good, very cool, very slick. It's being used at the Adobe conference. It's being used with hundreds of clients. They have a huge, huge client base. So in this one, this is a widget. It's a page controller that bootstraps and says, right, what am I doing? I've got a menu on the left. I've got some content, a welcome screen on the right. It knows if you're logged in or not. It knows what user you are. It's an intelligent controller. And on there we have another widget here. So in this architecture we have the left side, the menu, and the central content. So the router says, what page am I on? And it updates the nav menu and it plonks its data in the right-hand side. So you've got two widgets. And then I've identified a digit here again in red, or a widget. The menu itself is a widget. It's intelligent, it knows its information, it's reused everywhere. But it does very specific functionality. But the widget, the larger bit, knows how to populate that, knows how to start that up and how to bootstrap that, and it controls the communication. So, another page on this widget. This is actually what the previous wireframe ended up being. So, here we have, in the middle, the widget that's been put there. The page controller has placed that there. And we have widgets. Again, this is another list. I've written lots of lists in my time. It's another list component. It lazy loads as you scroll through. It gets to the bottom or 70% of the way through the page, and it loads the next page of data. Each item is a widget, and you'll see these being repeated throughout the UI. So the list goes through, it gets the data, it creates one of these person or identity widgets for each, each entry, and then they're reused everywhere, absolutely everywhere. So this is a widget as well, the view widget. And down here again, another highly reused asset, the agenda. So it's saying for this speaker, I mean, you should check out this link. The link's in the slide. You should check it out. It's a really nice UI. So it's saying, right, this person is talking at the closing general session. So you can see that. You can view that. You can click on it. And here's an agenda I wrote. So this is like a moving, sliding, like calendar, basically. Does some intelligent collision detection, but again, you identify the widgets in there. You say this whole thing is a widget, it's a controller, it has business logic, it provides a function. And in fact, we've written this in such a way that you can pick that up and put it on someone else's website. So Adobe, I think, have this on their website, on the conference page. You don't have to go into the app. You just go there and the agenda is there. So it's very important to consider how self-contained it is. So in there, we have another widget. Everything, I mean, the nav of the agenda is a widget as well, but the area is a widget. Every item in there is a widget. And you'll notice it looks very similar to the one on the other page. It's the same thing. It's the same widget reused with styling for width and height. We've got a line on the top rather than on the side, but it's the same component, exactly the same. And here again, now you see on this pop-up dialog, you can see the person, the people. This is the same as it was in the list. Reused, reconfigured, re-put in, and it's the power of widget-based architectures. You can reuse things, you can change things, it's great. So here, the dialog is a widget. Each item is a widget. So I'm going to move on to another client now, or not a client, this is one of my companies, Energy Cycle. So, what we do, we're a small startup. We do smart energy monitoring. So you have a CT clamp on it's a clamp that measures your energy usage on your main electrical supply. You have plugs that your appliances go into, like the Wemos. So we can look at appliance energy usage. We can advise people about power switching. We can talk about saving people energy. It's quite cool. If I have time, I'll show you a demo. Customizable appliance pages. So I've architected this in such a way that if a client comes along with enough money and says, hey, I want a custom page, we can do that for them. We can give them a custom page with custom interaction. So you can monitor electric, gas, water, solar. It can show your meter readings. It can do, those things. CO2 monitoring as well. We can monitor how much CO2 you're using. So the UI architecture, I mean, we're writing this ourselves. My colleague has written the back end. So it's PHP 5, I don't know what that is, and MySQL. I have no idea what PHP is, sorry, I don't do that. It's got a Node.js REST layer. So I'm trying to encourage him to use Node rather than PHP, but because the back end is currently in PHP, we're slowly converting things to Node as we write new functions. We're using a Redis session store. We're using RabbitMQ for data buffering. We have a lot of data, or we will have when we deploy it. But we will have a lot of data, we have a lot of feeds coming in. So they hit RabbitMQ, they sit on a queue to kind of buffer, and then they get read off, processed, and yeah. Dojo front end, I've gone for multi-page because we have very distinct areas of concern in the application. On one page, I'll go through it, but on one page you have like a dashboard, on another page you're viewing your usage. Very different, there's no need to have a single page app for this. The end user is any of you, it's anybody in their house, on their computer. How much energy have I used? It doesn't need to be quick. It doesn't need to be swipey. It's just an information page. So multi-page was the way to go. And page level routing with page controllers. So when you load up a page, it says, what's my route? What am I doing? Am I energy? Am I looking at a renewables resource? Am I looking at a generation resource? And it loads the appropriate controllers. And a controversial move, maybe, I've chosen. The page controllers tell the views what their endpoints are. So the application boots up, and the page controller says, right, what page am I? I'm the home page. I have got a dashboard of information. So I'm going to tell the dashboard, this is your endpoint. You go and get your data, and you show it. Okay? A lot of people, some people don't like that. Some people do it. Different choices for the applications and the architectures you're working on. So I'm going to skip over the back end, because I've got 5 minutes to go. But essentially, we have remote base units. You have a unit that gets deployed to the house. It sends data over broadband. We're looking at using the pager network as well. Very, very old school. But it's good for just viewing different data. So the data hits, it's processed. I'll show you the slides later. So this is the UI. We have a login here, which is a widget with widgets, and we have the dashboard I talk about. Quite pretty, very colourful, but again, it's a widget architecture. We have the controller. It's a templateless controller in this instance. It doesn't have a template. The HTML is the template. It just says, right, I'm controlling. I am on, I think you can see the URL there. I'm on dashboard. So I'm going to boot up the dashboard. And you see after the hash symbol, it says main. So this is the architecture I've chosen, and this is the way that the application bootstraps. It says, I'm on the dashboard page. I'm going to show the main dashboard. This is the main dashboard. Each of these items is a widget. So they get the data, they know how to talk to the server, they know how to do things. I'm going to click through, I haven't got time. Again, this bit here that says, what user are you? Are you logged in? Very, very small functionality, but it's a widget, because it's reused everywhere. And because, again, it's a client-side technology, it's important to make it a widget, so it can handle its own data. If you log out, that will say, hey, you've logged out. Why don't you log back in? So it's reused everywhere. And then you click through. I mean, if you find me later, I'll talk you through this. There's some really cool data. So you can say, right, this is when you've drilled down, and you'll notice the route along the top says detail. So we're on the detail page. We're looking at the main dashboard. We're looking at energy, and that energy is electricity. So the page controller, this thing, says, right, I'm the main page, so I'm going to tell this component on the left, this one, you're main. Go and get the main links. And then it's saying, right, you are energy. Load the energy view. And you, more importantly, are electricity, so go and get the electricity data. And it's the widgets are talking to each other, the controllers are relaying the information, and this is what I've chosen. And the graphs. So I'm going to just carry on through to say this is a custom page. And this is a page that a client has asked us to create for them to say, we have a Vortex hand dryer, we're better than Dyson. So makes a page to show how much better we are. So we have a chart to compare usage. We can compare from live data, we can aggregate the data, and we can compare how much energy they've used to how many paper towels they would have used. So it's very interesting. And finally, any questions? I mean, I'm happy to demonstrate this later if anyone wants to see. There's some really cool data. You can, for example, see that one of the other directors of the company has a bath at 10 o'clock every morning. You can see his water usage just goes mental. So it's cool. And you can see when the sun comes up, his solar panel starts generating electricity. So there's some really nice data. So any questions? No? Okay. Thank you.